Welcome, everybody. This is great. I guess Paul has a lot of followers. So, anyway, I'm going to start the night off by telling, thank you for coming. My name is Maureen Watson. I'm president of the Historical Society, in case you don't know me. And I have an announcement from the high school. There apparently is a club called the Civil Rights Stories Club, and they're a bunch of kids, and they raise money to have speakers come. And I just got an email today about this. There's going to be a speaker there on the 24th at the high school at 6:30, and she survived the Holocaust as a child, and she's now written a book. And this club raised enough money to get her to be there all day that day at school, so all the kids can hear. And it sounds very interesting to me, so I wanted to be sure and tell you. So it's, I'll leave these up by the food so you can look at them. And Steve Sizer is here by the door. He's got an announcement to make.
I'm working with the Litchfield Historical Society, so if you folks don't know, Saturday the 19th, next Saturday, next week, is Patriots Day. So it's the 250th anniversary of Lexington and Concord. And we're going to be having some activities on the green in Litchfield. There'll be a couple of red coats prowling around to make sure that you're all honorable to the king here, keeping everybody in line. And we'll be having a couple of horse and riders coming in to deliver the news. There will be a militia presence, and there will be the Litchfield Artillery giving off a few cannon shots and some salutes to a few of the townspeople that walked all the way up there to join in the fight. So I'll leave a flyer here on the table, and it starts about, well, they're saying 3 p.m. You can get there a little bit earlier, and hopefully you can find a parking spot. So, so there's a flyer.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay.
Okay, now this program tonight, Paul got inspired because Eric found this photograph when he was going through his dad's things, I think. And he brought it down to Squires and said it was on loan. I don't know if he'll ever get it back. But Paul, where's the thing it came in? That was pretty cool. Oh, over in the corner by the cabinet that's metal. It's like a huge metal sleeve that it was in. And so it inspired Paul to have a talk about it. And that's what he's going to do tonight.
So we're going to take a look at Barkhamsted in 1928 using this aerial photograph. This aerial photograph was done for the Hartford Water Company. The MPC came into being about 1930. This is a 1928 aerial photograph done for the Hartford Water Company because they knew they would be expanding an additional reservoir, and they had their eyes on the east branch of the Farmington River. So this aerial photograph concentrates on the east branch of the Farmington River from Massachusetts down through Heartland, through Barkhamsted to New Hartford. Now tonight I'm just going to concentrate on Barkhamsted. But the photograph is sitting right here. After the program you can take a look at it. There's a number of photographs taped together to make this big one. And unfortunately, it is pretty tough to see small details. If your house was here in 1928 and you're looking for it, not too many of the buildings are actually visible. But I do think there's compelling reasons to take a look at this photograph. It's very valuable in some of the details it tells us about Barkhamsted and of course the other areas covered by it. So that's what we're going to cover tonight. How do we know that it's 1928 and for the Hartford Water Company? Well, there's a label right on it. So that takes the guessing away. So, Hartford Water Company was always trying to keep up with the supply demands for Hartford, and they commissioned this, done by the Fairchild Aerial Services Company. This is one section of it. There are some details on here that can be seen.
Paul, can you give us a reference point where something like these is made?
Yeah, I'm gonna try and do that. There were probably several copies of this made. We do know they used a copy for the initial surveying to help with the surveying effort for the Barkhamsted Reservoir. There was a copy where they actually drew on this photograph or another copy of it, the boundaries of the properties that were purchased in Barkhamsted Hollow, Heartland Hollow, and the sides of the mountains. So I assume they had several copies of this, and this is one of the many copies. Back in the 1990s, we had an open house at the Center Schoolhouse, and I think it was this copy that Walt Landgraf got from the MDC, and we had it laid out for people to see. It was a big hit. And I think he talked them into giving that, he obtained that from the MDC, and Eric found it in the house and was good enough to bring it down and show it to us. So it's on loan to the Historical Society. This is a significant artifact, so it was a major tool in the development of the Seville Dam and the Barkhamsted Reservoir, which of course is probably the top story of Barkhamsted history. That project had a huge impact on the town of Barkhamsted, as you probably all know, and this was a tool used for that project. So, and not only that, this is a window back to 1928 of what the town looked like at 1,000 feet anyway. Water for Hartford is a book by Kevin Murphy. This is an excellent book. It covers the Seville Dam and Barkhamsted Reservoir, but that's just one or two chapters. He goes all the way back to the initial supply of water for Hartford.
Didn't he come here and give us a lecture on that years ago?
I don't remember
Yeah, I
that he did.
remember.
Really?
Yeah.
I know
Yeah, water for Hartford.
he talked to you. Your name, Harriet, is in the credits, I think. Maybe that's what you're remembering. But if you haven't read this book is well written and is packed with information, and I got a lot of information out of this. This aerial photograph is mentioned in the book. But he discusses how Hartford, we may forget, Hartford was a boom town in the second half of the 1800s, and it was growing like crazy, and they were always trying to keep up for the demand for water for Hartford. Even into the early 1900s, the Hartford Water Company had just built the big Neepog Dam and Reservoir, and that was finished in, I think, 1917. But that wasn't enough. They knew they were gonna need more, and I think they suspected they were gonna be supplying Metro Hartford, not just the city of Hartford. So they were gonna need more water, and they had their eyes on the east branch of the Farmington River. They had already built compensating reservoir, Richards Corner Dam, now it's Lake McDonough. That was finished in 1918. That does appear on this photograph. So actually they started planning for the new reservoir, which was going to be Barkhamsted Reservoir, in the 1920s. I was surprised to learn they actually started buying property in the mid-1920s. But in 1927, October of 27, they had a $1,250 contract with Fairchild Aerial Survey Company to do this work, photograph the east branch of the Farmington River from Massachusetts down to New Hartford. Fairchild Aerial Survey Company was started by Sherman Fairchild in 1924. He developed a new camera suited for this work that limited the distortions from a vibrating and bumpy airplane. And apparently he started out with a biplane, and it didn't work out very well, and he actually developed this new plane that was more suitable for aerial photography. It had a single wing mounted high, so it was kind of out of the way. The cameras were mounted in the base of the plane, and they were controlled electrically with a wire that they could operate the shutter a little remotely. They didn't have to be right at the camera. It had an enclosed heated cabin. And this is the plane that flew down the valley. And one of my favorite parts of that Water for Hartford book is when he talks about this flight. Now, there weren't a lot of planes flying over Barkhamsted even in 1928. And 3 months prior to this flight, Lindbergh flew across the Atlantic. And so there was an interest in aviation. So when this plane flew low and slow down the east branch of the Farmington River, people came out of their houses to look at it and wave to it. Now you can see the irony there, because this plane, the work it was doing was starting the process that within 10 years forced all those people out of the valley. Now what I'm going to try and do tonight is focus in on 6 areas of the town and show you sections from this aerial photograph. And because it's hard to see the details, even my enlargements, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to show you some old pictures of what that area looked like in 1928. Not all the photos are from 1928, but it shows you what it would have looked like then. And why not start off with Barkhamsted Hollow? Can you see this red dot? I know some people have a hard time. Well, there's a modern map of Barkhamsted with the familiar lower reservoir, Seville Dam, and the upper reservoir. Now here's a section of this aerial photograph. Can you see what that is? That's compensating reservoir. So that was built 10 years earlier, so there it is. But what's missing up here? No big reservoir. Now this is a little bit of an enlargement, and there's the tip of the compensating reservoir right there. And this aerial photograph is showing us something that is a little unusual, because there is the east branch of the Farmington River flowing down into the compensating reservoir. And maybe to help get your bearings a little bit, I'm pretty sure that is Beach Rock in that red square. Beach Rock, have you visited Beach Rock? And in the blue circle is the center cemetery where it is now. It wasn't there, it wasn't a cemetery when this photograph was taken. But there's what's Route 181 going by and up. But tip of compensating reservoir, so Seville Dam is probably right in here. And of course, all this is underwater later on from the Barkhamsted Reservoir. And one of the most significant things this aerial photograph is telling us is, look at all the farmland. I mean, a third or up to almost a half of this land in this shot is farmland, pasture, hayfields, cropland. And right there is the road in the hollow going down to New Hartford. Of course, this got interrupted and had to be changed because of compensating reservoir. Now this shot is a little further up the valley. So the compensating reservoir would be down here. Now, this is one of the seams. Remember I said they pasted or taped together photos, so don't think that's like I-95.
The railroad.
But to get your bearings, I believe, okay, this is Route 181. Now is Route 181, and Day Road is right there, and the Congregational Church is right there. And there's the road going down into the hollow. And that road crossed the Farmington River. There's the bridge in the blue box. That's the bridge over the Farmington River. And in the red circle, that's the Four Corners, where the store and post office was in the hollow. Now, of course, definitely the bridge and the Four Corners is under the water of Barkhamsted Reservoir now. But take a look, all that farmland. Up here, the Four Corners is right there. If you go north towards Heartland, right in here is where the Universalist Church was. If you go below the Four Corners, Burden Farm is right in there. We have a Burden descendant here tonight. So look at all that farmland. Yes, where it wasn't already farmland, when they were preparing this for the reservoir, they had to cut all the trees down. All the buildings were either moved or burned.
You know, years ago, Walter took us on a tour of that area. We went down there in a bus.
Yes.
And the water
They
was
did it
very,
this year,
very
too.
low.
Well,
And that
we still do the west side, but we weren't able to go on the east side like we did with Waltham, because they have a big logging job that lasted 3 or 4 years, so our most recent tours couldn't go on that side. Uh-oh. This is the bridge over the Farmington River that I was showing you. Probably, I don't know when, but this bridge was replaced with a metal bridge, and I'm not sure when. So maybe in 1928 it was the metal bridge. I always liked this shot though. That was the road leading down across the river into where the post office and store was at the Four Corners. I don't know why this is not working. Is it plugged in?
Battery's probably good.
You're using the laser too much.
Did you do that or did I talked about the Four Corners where the post office and store was. Here's the store. That's the third Merrill Tavern. There were 3 Merrill Taverns. 2 of them still exist. This one right here is the one that no longer exists. But that's the Four Corner. I think this goes up to the east and ends up in the vicinity of where 219 and 179 come together. You're familiar with the brick Methodist church up there? And I think that's the road to New Hartford. This is another shot of the store and post office and Merrill Tavern.
Like where it
Oh.
Yeah, it's underwater.
The same store where the neighbor was?
Yes, that was the Herbert Case store, and in 1914, he was murdered there. And, remember I mentioned the Universalist Church? If you were at the Four Corners and went north towards Heartland, just a half a mile, I think, north, is this scene right here with the Universalist Church. And that's another shot. Now this had a small cemetery right next to it. That cemetery had to be moved along with the big cemetery. This is the Burden Farm. This is south of the store and post office on the road going to New Hartford. That's Harold Burton. He raised Shorthorn and Devon cattle, and the family said he used oxen right up to when tractors were available. He still liked using oxen. Okay, the four corners with the store and post office are right down there at the bottom. So this is the road that went north. The Farmington River is right there. And there's the big Luther Case tobacco barn right there. I mean, that building was big enough to show up even on this aerial photograph. Go back to big. And this is the Monroe Hart Farm right here, and all these pastures and hayfields. And there's the Farmington River. So that tobacco barn was right alongside the river. And we have Tom Hart here tonight. He's a descendant of the Harts that lived there. So there's the big tobacco barn. The river would be right over here. One more.
They could take it out in 55? Probably gone before then.
Well, that was being taken out when they were preparing the hollow for the reservoir.
Oh, okay.
All the trees were cut and all the buildings were either moved or burned. This is a vista looking at that same area. That tobacco barn would be right in there. This is the Monroe Hart Farm. The farmhouse is hidden behind those trees. That's there, the Hart sawmill in operation. See the steam coming out of it.
So that's looking west,
This is looking east.
looking east, okay.
So upstream would be over here, downstream down here. There was a lot of tobacco. Hollow was mostly dairy and tobacco, you know, in the early 1900s, 1928. A lot of tobacco. Guess there was money in tobacco because it was grown all over Barkhamsted. Albert Slade Diary, he lived on Park Road. He grew some tobacco. Tobacco was grown on East River Road. And
Rappers?
Rappers is shaved tobacco, isn't it? I don't think, there might have been some shaved tobacco because one of our photos on East River Road, I think, shows shaved tobacco, believe it or not. I think the rest of it is not. Okay. This is the Monroe Hart complex. That's the main farmhouse. This was another house. Just above the tobacco barn and the Monroe Hart Farm was the Munson grist mill. Really old building. At the time, 1928, this had been converted into a sawmill. But there's the bridge. This thing's right on the east branch of the Farmington River, and there's the bridge. It goes over it.
Was that brick?
No,
I think it's wood. Oh.
no, I think it was clapboard, wasn't it? Yeah, clapboard. This is Luther Case owned that big tobacco barn, and this is Luther Case's maternal grandmother. Her last name was Lee. I love this photograph because it gives you a sense of what the river looked like. You don't have too many pictures of the Farmington River in Barkhamsted Hollow, but this is one of them. The Case family, just like 4 or 5 years ago, gave us a bunch of pictures, and this is one of them. And she's sitting upstream from the tobacco barn, I think. And I started looking at this picture. I wonder if I could see the grist mill, and there it is. You could just make it out in the grist mill. But that gives you an idea what the Farmington River was like, a little smaller than the West Branch. But that does look like a nice inviting section right there. She's enjoying the day right there. Okay, so this is the 1928 photograph. There's the big Luther Case tobacco barn, and the Case houses were right there. The river's right here. That's where that grist mill sawmill is, and that's the Hart farm with all the pastures and stuff. Let's go back. Okay, let's jump to Barkhamsted Center. Barkhamsted Center is right there, hey, right in the center of town. And there's the corresponding, there's that seam again, but Barkhamsted Center is right there, I believe. So the town hall was there, the church, right across from the church is Merrill Tavern. You go down the hill, there was another Merrill Tavern right on the corner. That's where the cemetery was. The schoolhouse was located right there. Okay. Here's a picture of the church and the schoolhouse in the town hall. This is 1879 when they had the big birthday party. That's the 100th anniversary of the town of Barkhamsted. Okay. Across the street, not shown in that prior photograph, this is Merrill Tavern. I had to sneak in a current picture that we just took of Merrill Tavern. We just got the shutters on, thanks to Joel.
Yes.
And it looks great. There's the church across the street, and you can see the church on this. It almost looks like this old photo, probably from the 1920s of Merrill Tavern. It doesn't have any shutters, does it? Yes, it does. They're all closed. And we were chagrined at that fact because if just one of those was open, we might possibly have seen the old windows. We wanted to see, maybe when this photo was taken, it was already upgraded by the NBC. They put in new windows. But if they had just left one of those shutters open, we might have seen, you know, was it 12 over 8 windows? What type of windows did it have originally? I mentioned the other Merrill Tavern at the bottom of the hill. That's what this is, and there's the cemetery across the street. So this would be very close to the edge of the reservoir. But this is the east end of Barkhamsted Center. This house was moved, and in the 1934 aerial photograph, in 1934 they did aerial photographs of the whole state, and Fairchild did that also. And if you look closely on that, this house had been moved by 1934, and you can see the trail going through the fields and the woods up to Beatner Road, what's now Beatner Road, and it's currently the Baker House. Yeah, this was owned by the Kidman family at the time the reservoir came in. Across the street from that building was the schoolhouse, Center Schoolhouse. So the river valley is down there, looking east. Go back. Go back more. And I love this photograph because what's that? That's that Universalist church on the other side of the river. Okay. Let's take a look at Center Hill. Center Hill is right in here. That's Slade Road. If you know where Slade Road is, that's about in the middle of Center Hill. Park Road is here, and in the old days, Park Road was called West Center Hill Road. So this is all Center Hill. Center Hill was pretty cool. A lot of farms up there. The soil, like most of the soil in Barkhamsted, was pretty poor, but in a lot of the hilltops, the hillside farms, there was that hard pan soil that was magical in retaining water. So they could grow hay even in drought conditions up up in the hills where they had that hard pan. So I think that's why a lot of farmers liked to be up on the hill. Soil wasn't that good, but it could grow hay, which was critical. If you produced a lot of hay, you could have a lot of cattle. If you had a lot of cattle, you had wealth. Here's the corresponding picture. There's Slade Road right there. So that's Slade Road, that's Slade Road. But look at the farms. Tons of cleared land, and this is Park Road, West Center Hill Road. And look at the farms. That's one thing this aerial photograph is telling us. Even in 1928, some of these farms were growing up to woods, but in 1928 there was still a lot of farmland. This is a little closer view. There's Slade Road. That green arrow is pointing to the Howd farm, H-O-W-D. The blue arrow is pointing to Sky Farm, owned by the Shepherds. And this one, pretty close to you guys. This is what was Henry Gidman's house in my youth. It was a Rockwell house, a fairly early house. And this is on Park Road. The yellow arrow is pointing to the Slade House, a brick farmhouse that was dismantled in, I think, the 1980s. It's not there now. There's the brick Slade House. That is the Rockwell house. Late Henry Gidman owned that. That house is a very early house. It was torn down and moved somewhere in Massachusetts. I'm just glad I got a picture of it while it was still standing. When I was young, that thing was still standing. This, I mentioned Sky Farm that the Shepherds owned. What a view they had. Look at the mountains down in the valley. When the hayfields were still there and the cropland, they must have had an awesome view. This is where Diademia Shepherd lived. Does anybody recognize that name? Does that ring any bells? Diademia Shepherd? Well, soon we forget. I think it was 2005. There was a lady named Diane Thurston who found Diademia's diary, a part of it, at a tag sale. And she didn't know where Diademia lived, but she read through every detail, got a few hints, and tracked it down. Diademia lived at Sky Farm. And she did a couple programs for us on that diary and what Diademia went through. And she was about, I think, in her 80s, almost 90, when she did the diary. This would have been in the 1890s. Okay. I mentioned that that Howd family farm. This is very fortunate to have a picture of this. This is one of the oldest houses in Barkhamsted before it was torn down, you know, from the MDC. MDC not only bought land in the hollow, they wanted to control the watershed of that reservoir, the Barkhamsted Reservoir. So they were buying land up in the hills, and this was up in the hills, in Center Hill. Next. That's Elwin Howd and his oxen. I gotta believe that's Old Center Hill Road, and that's probably his house right there. Okay. I could not see Center Hill School. It's on Slade Road, was on Slade Road, but there's a picture of it, a brick school. Center Hill was amazing. Not only all those farms, they had a couple of brick yards up there. That's probably where these bricks came from. They had a distillery, they had a tannery, and an iron foundry. Maybe not all at the same time, but in the 1800s at various times, they had a lot going on up in Center Hill. Pleasant Valley, let's take a look at Pleasant Valley. Everyone knows where Pleasant Valley is. Well, here's Pleasant Valley on the aerial photograph. There's the bridge in Pleasant Valley right there. That's the west side of compensating reservoir Lake McDonough. You old timers remember Goose Green Beach? Would have been right in here. And I think, the current town beach is right in here. But there's the west branch of the Farmington River. Pleasant Valley just barely made it on this aerial photograph. There's a couple things I want to point out in Pleasant Valley. Okay, I flipped this. Here's north at this end. There's the bridge in Pleasant Valley. So Route 44 would be in here, not shown. But there's the bridge in Pleasant Valley. You cross the bridge, go up past the firehouse would be right in there. There's the sharp corner above the firehouse. So this is Pleasant Valley. There's the church and cemetery right there.
Second bridge.
It looks like a bridge right there. Go ahead, Julie. This is a little closer. There's the bridge. This is actually a diversion dam. Right where the blue arrow is pointing, in 1928, it was out of business, but before that, it was the Rogers Grape Shop. And back in the 1800s, it was the Doolittle Wagon Mill. And that had water power from the Farmington River. And this dam was diverting water into the mill race that came down and fed that factory complex. Now, you know the brick house in Pleasant Valley, across the street from the brick house, there's that pond. That pond is a remnant of the mill race. But the mill race, this diversion, this is Fuller Road, where Fuller Road hits East River Road. So that diversion was just a little bit downstream from where Fuller Road hits East River Road. There's the church and cemetery. You see the road system there in the cemetery. Now this is something, 1928 photograph is telling us something. What are all these black dots?
Is it an orchard?
Huh?
An orchard?
I gotta believe it's an orchard. I mean. We have a good number of photos of Pleasant Valley. I've never seen an orchard there. So that would have been just north. That orchard would be right in, where the community gardens are, near the church. And even into the elementary school playground, I think. So that was an interesting feature. I think if you really study this aerial photograph, some details like that are gonna pop out. Okay. This is a nice photograph, probably around 1928. Greenwood's Pond is still there in New Hartford, backing up water. The drive-in theater would be right about here. There's the corner where the store is. The store was built in 1959, so it's not there. There's the church. Right across from the church would have been the old schoolhouse that burned in 1927. It looks to me like the new schoolhouse is right there.
Was that that last picture, was that the ice house along the pond way up at the top of the picture?
Yeah, that might be.
Way up, that white thing.
Yes, there were big ice houses down here, but I don't know if that's it or not. I'm just not sure.
Is that school the one that Richard Church has some involvement in?
Yes, when the school burned, was it two church? Was it Ken and Richard, or
I think so.
one or more church boys got there early to start the stove? I guess it was still in the winter cold. They were supposed to start the stove. They put a lot of kindling in the stove, touched it off, and went out to play. And they left the damper open, and the thing got so hot that the school caught fire, burned down. Harriet Day Boulevard, a story I heard, she was throwing books and stuff out the window to try and save it. She almost died in that. Okay, go ahead. Here's the Methodist church, nice picket fence, hiding what might have been an orchard behind there. You can't see, okay. Here's the schoolhouse. So this is, the new location, you know, just Ripley Hill Road goes past the store. This would be just past the store, near the elementary school. So the bones of this building are in the town hall, because they kept adding on to this. That building grew and eventually became the town hall, was moved closer to the store at some point. This is that Rogers Rake Shop, and there's the mill pond / mill race. The river's over here. This is not the Farmington River, this is the mill race. About where the fisherman parking lot is now. Now, they did have a steam engine that blew up and the steam engine landed in the river. But they may have still been using water power, I'm not sure, maybe a combination, maybe they discontinued the water power. Here's the bridge. In 1928, this would have been the bridge in Pleasant Valley. Another view of it, there's the Rogers Rake Shop, and in this one you can see the smokestack for the steam plant. Okay. Now I wanted to point something out. There's the brick house right there. So there were two bridges. If you were crossing the Farmington River in 1928, you had to cross two bridges. This is the little bridge that goes over the mill race. So that's the mill race. Went over it and then took a sharp turn downstream and then another sharp turn to cross the bridge. Okay. This is another view. That's still the old bridge right there. The mill race is under here, but you can get this is looking west. So you want, the brick house would be on your right and East River Road on your right. So look at the turn. There were two of those turns. Now, in the old days, horses and wagons, that's not a problem. The horses are going around those turns at 3 miles an hour. But automobiles is a different story. And I love this headline, 1916 Hartford Current article, "Farmer Dead, Wife a Wreck After Auto Crash." And I gotta believe those sharp turns, they probably were going too fast. Yeah. And if you read this, it tells you that the grandson of President Garfield went off at the same place that this accident was. So those sharp turns were a problem when you've got automobiles going faster than 3 miles an hour. Okay. In 1938, that bridge washed out, and this is a picture. The 38 flood took out the old bridge, and that's when the current bridge was built. And when they built that current bridge, they straightened out that. They filled in the mill race. There was no more rake shop, so they could fill in that mill race, and they made that more of a straight shot going across the bridge. So no 90-degree turns anymore, where we'd still have people wrecking their cars. I want to take a look at Barkhamsted Green, the section of town called the Green, or Goose Green. Where is it? You go up the hill east out of Pleasant Valley, you go by the firehouse, and that sharp turn. Where is that? It's right there. There's Pleasant Valley, you go up the hill, there's the sharp turn. There's so much history at the Green. Here it is right here. There's the Pleasant Valley Bridge. You go up the hill, and there's the sharp turn. So Goose Green Road coming north from New Hartford. This is the Farmington River Turnpike in the old days. Compensating reservoir kind of screwed that up a little bit. But when I was a kid, that was still the access to get into Goose Green Beach. Now they moved it down a little and it's right in here. But that's the old Farmington River Turnpike. Comes up, it goes in back of the firehouse and this Fuller Road and goes up into Massachusetts. And this is what's now 181-318 coming up. And so what's not on here is 318 going across. But there's so much history in that location. William Taylor's farm is right there. His house was right in here, but they tore it down and he rebuilt the house right there. We have William Taylor's diary from 1803, I think it is, Mike. It's not here. 1803 to like 1830, we have sections of his diary. One of the interesting things he talked about is the militia used to train at the green, right in here. And one day they were shooting off cannon and the concussion or pressure waves broke some of his windows. Some of William Taylor's windows were broken. Yes, Steve?
Paul, is that Farmington River Turnpike the same one that connects in New Hartford along the river?
Yes, just below Richards Corner Dam.
Yes.
Yes, that's the same one. No. What else happened on the green? Militia trained there, William Taylor.
John Brown.
Yes, the green schoolhouse and the John Brown tree. John Brown's maternal grandparents lived right down here somewhere. And before they moved out of Torrington, he grew up in Torrington till he was about 6. His mother would bring him to visit the grandparents, and he would play under that oak tree. And it became known as the John Brown tree. I looked for it. It's got to be right in there, but I can't remember. We're not exactly sure when that thing blew down. It was right around 1928, I think. So it may not be in this photograph. But the school was there. There was a big, beautiful building, an old tavern built before 1795, the Nathaniel Lewis Tavern, located right on that corner. Okay. And here's a close-up. I really wanted to see I'd like to know what that green really looked like. Apparently it wasn't very big. This is 1928. I'd like to see it in 1850 or earlier. But I don't know, there's something going on right there. There's something right in the middle. I don't know what that was. The schoolhouse would be right in there, and the John Brown tree next to it. William Taylor had a barn. Nathaniel Lewis building was right in there. And what do we have right here? That's a big building. Another tobacco barn. That was a little detail I wasn't aware of, that there was a tobacco barn probably around where Rock Tree Apartments are. So this, if you study this thing, it will give you some details. Yes.
How did the Goose Green name come about? Do you know that?
Well, this area was called the Green, and
Right.
sometimes Goose Green, although in the old days, I don't see Goose Green that much.
But it's stuck around for the name of the street now and the beach.
We're not sure where the name came from, but I assume, maybe, local farmers had geese on the green. This was not a huge traditional green. Like, have you ever seen Lebanon green? It's a mile long. Real greens in the old days were huge, and they pastured cattle on them. I don't think this was ever like that. It might have been a tongue-in-cheek name.
That size, that, really just do that little.
Yes, there's still a little green there. Steve?
I was told, I don't remember by whom, that the Goose Green itself is an English term. It came from England.
Yeah.
The term Goose Green.
In the Falkland Islands, there's a goose green. Isn't that English too? I don't know. So there's the west side of compensating reservoir, you know, Goose Green Beach would be in here, Stanley Cove over here. That's Fuller, that's the pond on Fuller Farm. I don't know, sometimes we forget there's a sizable pond out in back of Fuller Farms. Okay, this is an even closer view, and I'd like to know what that dot is. But that's the green right there, I guess, I'm assuming. And there's that tobacco barn, and there's another barn right there, and I don't think, this is the road that's now 181. The Ladazori house, I think, is in here. I don't think that's the Ladazori house, is it? I love this view. This, was taken before 1928, but it's looking down where compensating reservoir would be. When I was a kid, you could drive by what's now the Ladazori house and look down and see compensating reservoir and see boats. But you can't now, but this used to be fields, and this is very close to the Ladazori house looking down in the valley. So Goose Green Beach was over here somewhere, Stanley Cove here, I guess. And look at that, there's the roof of that. I don't know if that's the tobacco barn or that other structure, but I never really noticed that before. But this, looking at this, made me check this out a little closer. There's the green schoolhouse, not because it was painted green, it was on the green. And there's, I think that probably was William Taylor's barn. So this road would be going down to Goose Green Road towards New Hartford. And the sharp corner is, you know, the photographer's back is to the sharp corner. There's the John Brown oak tree. I mentioned that Nathaniel Lewis Tavern. That's a beautiful house. That burned in 1914, so it just missed being on the 1920. But this is the sharp corner right here. You can still see that foundation, especially when the leaves are off the trees. And you can see a row of what looked like hitching posts, stone hitching posts. They're not hitching posts, they were holding up this picket fence.
My house had all, stone fence posts and
Yeah. I think that was common, but they're still there and the foundation's there. What a beautiful house. Right on the Farmington River Turnpike, taking advantage of all that traffic. Okay, the last section, just a few more to go. Not too bad. Of course, we wanted to look at Almond Farm, which is where Squire's Tavern is, the headquarters of the Historical Society. And that's on East River Road. You go up here, it's right in here, I think. And here it is. It's right on the edge of the aerial photograph. Squire's Tavern is right about there. This is West Branch of the Farmington River. There's that diversion dam. So Fuller Road is coming out right about there. If you go north on East River Road, there's the Almond Farm. Okay. This is a wonderful picture of the Almond Farm, which is now Squire's Tavern. All those fences. You know, in the old days, they had all kinds of animals, horses, cattle, sheep, pigs. They had all kinds of cropland that animals weren't supposed to get into. So the roads were fenced off to protect their croplands from stray animals that got loose and were running down the road. So I think with our modern eyes, we'd be surprised if we went back to this time. The roads were still fenced off wherever there was farmland. This is a little closer view, but you still can't see too much. Almond Farm right in there, the barns, and I think that's what's now Squire's Tavern. Okay. This is a nice shot. The river is over here, so you're looking southwest or west. And the road, East River Road, is right in here, went right between some of those barns. And so this is east of the building, probably a potato field. This is John Ullman. If you looked on this aerial photograph, he would not be a pixel on this photograph. He was killed by a bull on the farm in 1924. Kind of a freak situation. But that's one of the barns right in the back of them, okay. And that's it, but I just wanna say, this is an amazing artifact, show a window in time going back almost 100 years. So we're very fortunate to be able to look at this, so thank you.